Previously on Balls.
Comfort is going to try and get a man called Joe Mann on the line. Joe Mann, great broadcaster. He stood in for Robert Marawa this week and took all the calls about Gordon Igesund, you know, after going out of the World Cup and before the Zimbabwe game. And Joe, I thought, handled it very well. It's one of those times where you listen to a radio show and you've got all these callers coming on, I want this, I want that. And Joe kind of put it together. He liaised, he kind of sorted people out. So I was hoping to speak to Joe, who I phoned just before the programme. And there you are. Is that Joe Mann?
Yes, it is.
Joe, I'm just explaining to my listeners on www.balls.co.za that I listened just by chance. You know, sometimes you're driving. I listened to you dealing with a lot of hot-headed callers, football fans, rightly aggrieved by our failure to qualify for the World Cup. We then went into the Zimbabwe game, which for any South African, you know, even for me, as I get to reacquaint myself with South African kind of domestic politics, I have a lot of Zimbabwean friends that I talk to, a lot of South Africans, and it was a hell of a defeat. Actually, it was quite a galling defeat against Zimbabwe, where we were outplayed. Joe, you did well at settling down the viewers and your callers the other night, and you did well at kind of talking about the long-term plans that Gordon might have. How do you feel now after the Zimbabwe game about the future of Bafana Bafana? Have you got any little gems that you can put to me about how we can look to the future and maybe succeed?
Well, I mean, I think when they spoke to him afterwards, you know, he did say that, you know, it's good to lose sometimes as well, because you know, I think he was able to take something from the match. Because, you know, after having watched, like you were saying, some of the guys, you can see that they're not ready for international football, and that's why we were a tad bit slower than the Zimbabweans. And I think people, you know, shouldn't be surprised that the kind of quality that the Zimbabweans have in their squad, because we see them week in and week out doing the business for the PSL teams. So we shouldn't be surprised by losing to Zimbabwe, because last time around we played, it was Knowledge Musona again who managed to score a brace. So, you know, we shouldn't be surprised by losing to our neighbours.
I'm not surprised at all. I think there were 9 PSL players playing for Zimbabwe. There were quite a lot playing for Botswana on the Saturday where we actually won 4-1. But I do feel that if you look at the top Zimbabwean players, you Cuthbert Malajila, if you look at Knowledge Musona, Karma Biliat, they've got players with real elan, real spirit. And how ironic that Knowledge Musona finally comes good, Joe, against Bafana Bafana when he hasn't scored for Kaizer Chiefs. I found it very hard to watch. I've got to say, I also found Ukraine-England very hard to watch, trying to watch both games. Joe, I think that an international manager that comes out, you know, after more than a year in charge and quite a few games behind him now, and says sometimes it's good to lose, I think he holds himself up for criticism. The back page of the Citizen today, Gordon blasts Bafana, defeat, young side fails to impress against neighbours. Is Gordon going in the right direction? Is he building a squad that we can believe in? He said he had youngsters out, but he had an average age of 27 in that side against Zimbabwe. Against Botswana, I don't know if you saw yesterday, I had a massive row with Mike McCarb, because I felt that Tabu Ntete is an average player. Yeah. I used the word mediocre, which was probably, it's the same as average, but maybe it's a bit more pejorative, isn't it? So I just felt that if we had Sianda Kulu flown all the way over from Russia, and we had Makocha flown all the way over, where he's leading PEC's Vola, you know, at the top of the Eredivisie and winning Man of the Match awards, I just felt that even against Botswana, we should have been putting the young guys, the promising guys in, rather than the 28-year-old Ntete, who's a very nice man, and I apologise if I caused him any offence, but there was a massive row between me and Mike McCarb yesterday, because I think that Sianda Kulu and people like Makocha and Tulani Serrero, who went home under a bit of a cloud, they are our future, aren't they?
Yeah.
Aren't they our future, Joe?
Well, I mean, you would think so, because, I mean, especially when Gordon came in, he was the one guy who said he'd been looking for youngsters and he'd been looking for players all around the world that were going to represent South Africa. I mean, obviously that's where he managed to unearth guys like Dean Furman, but you'd think that, you know, especially with 2 international dates, I also didn't understand why he sent back half the team, you know, when the rest of the world is also playing friendlies as well. I mean, I mentioned the other day that Lionel Messi doesn't mind flying halfway around the world to go to his games as well, so I don't think that it would have been an excuse to send the overseas players back to play against Zimbabwe, because at the end of the day, playing for a national team should be, a matter of pride that much that we shouldn't say, okay, now because we're playing Zimbabwe, we should be able to just, send the international guys back, because we still want to, we still want to be able to be proud of our Bafana team, and we still want to have the best players. And if we want to have a look at some guys, then why not look at some of those youngsters that are so promising, some of the guys that, he promised us that he would be unearthing from around the world who are playing soccer at some of the best leagues in the world. So I was also a bit disappointed to see the guys going, even though, I guess the Tulani thing, I wasn't so disappointed to see him going, but the rest of the players, I think I was a bit disappointed to see them heading back to their European clubs, and everyone else had to stay here and then put up an under-par performance.
Mate, it wasn't just disappointing to see the overseas contingent all flying home. Many of them hadn't even set a foot on a competitive field. But it was inexplicable. This is an international week.
Yeah.
Last weekend was an international weekend, so we can get the players. FIFA will back us. Tuesday was an international night of football. We didn't have to send Makocha home. We could have put him in the side to play Zimbabwe. Let's have a look at him. We could have put Sianda Kulu in the side for Tuesday, and a couple of the other lads who didn't get a game against Botswana. But for some reason, we returned, except for Darren Keat, of course, he stayed. And we didn't do what I thought we were going to do and what we could have done. It was an international week, Joe. It makes no sense to me.
And the other thing that also doesn't make sense, as much as I did defend Gordon, and I do still think that he's on the right path, is that, last time around, we took a weekend side to Zimbabwe when we played on that artificial pitch on their side, and we lost there 2-0. So you would have thought that, there would have been some sort of a grudge, to say, these are our neighbors. We're not going to get beaten by guys that we turn into superstars. Like the Kingston Carters and the Knowledge Mosanas and the Karma Billiards are stars because of our league, and obviously there's strength in our league as well. But you'd think that there'd be that niggliness of playing a neighbor or like playing in a derby match. So you would have thought that it would have been a big game for us to need to, and especially having lost to Nigeria as well the way that we did. Where you think that we've got so many Nigerian people and we've got so many Zimbabwean people in this country that we don't want to be putting up performances that we can't even be proud of to say when we go to work the next day, when you face up against your friends from either Nigeria or Zimbabwe, to say, yeah, I know that Bafana of yours, and so it was a little bit difficult to swallow.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. But I felt that somehow the people at SAFA maybe hadn't got the full impact of the fact that when we play sides like Botswana, any other African side really, there's a huge diaspora in this country, particularly of Zimbabwean lads. And we had a good old laugh on Twitter. We were all talking about, is Robert Mugabe going to count the goals at the end of it and all that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is, when I go down to my local kind of club, the Zimbabwean lads were cock-a-hoop, and the South African lads were absolutely on their knees. The football speaking element in this country, and I think that we should have put out a top squad. Youngsters, fine. I don't mind youngsters, but put some of our international players in, because they were entitled under FIFA rules to stay, because Tuesday was an international. Like you say, Messi was playing, Ronaldo was playing, everyone except Wayne Rooney was playing with a hole in his head, and I just felt that we could have done a little bit better, and hence, I suppose that's what leads to an argument with Mike McCabe, who is Gordon's agent and an agent for quite a few of the players. I feel that sometimes Gordon is in a comfort zone, because there's no one really. There's not going to be another appointment. With Danny Jordan about to get in as president at SAFA, I think he's now assured of that role. I've just called him and left him a message to call me. Seems like he doesn't need me anymore now that Irving Koza's pulled out of the race. I see a situation where Danny gets in, Gordon is in, and I think it will improve football in this country, but we can't leave Gordon Iggesund and Danny Jordan in too much of a comfort zone, because they won't push hard, and we should have pushed hard against Zimbabwe. But Joe, listen, what's it like, mate, when you get all those callers on? We don't do calls on this show. We might when the new studio's open, but we don't do calls. What's it like when they all come on, Joe, and they're all saying, oh, Gordon this, Gordon that, and you have to kind of keep control? Do you find that easy? Is it an easy job?
Well, I think I give them as much time to be able to say what they what they want and what they came to say, and sometimes they kind of spin themselves in circles, and spin themselves in circles, and then I kind of don't even have to defend anything that they're saying. I remember that one caller who was talking about the credentials and about how we lost to Ethiopia and how we got whipped against Ethiopia. So you just let him speak and let him speak and let him speak until he gets himself dizzy and is not quite sure what he's talking about. But I suppose it's a part of the job just to be able to calm everyone down and just say, look, he is our national coach, and But like you said, there is a certain level of a comfort zone that he finds himself in because, Gavin Hunt's just taken the job at Wits, so if not Gordon, then who,
Well, Steve Compella was the initial favourite, wasn't he? And his Free State Stars struggling a bit this season, stuck there in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Gavin Hunt won't take the Bafana job, at least for a couple of years, with his plans at Wits are long term and quite deep, I think. So Gordon's pretty much. And I normally back Gordon Nicholson. I think he's an astute manager. He's won the Premier League in this country 4 times with 4 different clubs. I have no problem with that, but I think we have to be allowed to criticise him. To have his agent come on to me and lambaste me for saying that Ntete was mediocre, particularly against Nigeria, and that Kulu should have played, I took exception to. But we seem to have sorted it out. Joe, have you got a particular? I always want to ask Robert this and Thomas and Lambo and all them. I always tell people I'm an Amazulu fan. I grew up playing my football down in Umlazi, and Amazulu were the local rivals to Umlazi Bushbucks. So I'm an Usutu man. I shout Usutu at people when they stop me at the traffic lights and that. What do you shout?
I'm a loud and proud Kaizer Chiefs fan. Like my Twitter handle would suggest, Joe Man for life, Kosi for life. And I know why you're asking that question, because a lot of like the people you say, like the sports broadcasters, don't really want to say which team they support, just in case people think that they have a sort of certain bias towards it. And I think my philosophy towards that is that, first and foremost, I am a fan, whether it's football, cricket, rugby, soccer, I'm a fan. And I think as a football broadcaster, for me to become that much more credible, I think people have to know that I'm watching the soccer as a fan, and I'm watching it because I love a certain team. And, I'm not going to, I don't want to hide behind saying that I support the PSL or I support Bafana. I put my colors to the mast and I say I'm a Chiefs fan, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to be less impartial when Chiefs are winning or when Chiefs are losing, kind of thing. If anything, it just means that if Chiefs play badly, I'm going to be that much more disappointed, and I'll voice it. And if they play well, I'll say it as well. But either way, it's just about me actually being a soccer fan, which gives me that I would think would give me that sort of credibility to say, okay, this guy, he's one of us. He's not just an aficionado who's talking at us, but he's actually a fan who's talking with us and feels the way we feel as well.
Here's the truth of it, right? Comfort, you're nodding in agreement. Comfort is an open Orlando Pirates fan.
Yep.
Skull and crossbones tattooed across his forehead. And obviously, as I say, I'm an Amazulu and Arsenal fan. It's open. What gets me about some of the people here is that when you ask them who they support, they won't say because they're scared to kind of upset the opposite, the other team. Normally it's Pirates and Chiefs. But if you're a football man, if you love your football, if you spend your life like you and I do and Comfort does, revolving around the game, you've got to have been a fan. When you were 12 or 13, your dad gave you a slap on the back of the head and said you got to support Portsmouth, like my dad did. So, no, I support Arsenal, and that's what happens in this country as well. I mean, Sundowns fans, and I'm completely bemused. Liverpool fans in this country, what are they on about? I mean, I haven't won a trophy almost as long as Arsenal, and I like it. I like it that openly on your like you say, Joe Man for life, an obvious reference to Jessica Matang's brilliant sloganism at Kaizer Chiefs, and you're quite happy to put your heart where your mouth is, as it were. And Joe, I would say again, listening to you the other night, great handling of very difficult callers. I wonder sometimes if a lot of football fans understand how difficult it is to move from caller to caller. One of them shouting, "Gordon's got to go," and the next one saying, "Gordon must stay." And I just listened to that, and I wanted to get you on today to say it's a particular talent, and I enjoyed it immensely, Joe, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Well, thank you very much. And I mean, I just wanted to ask you one question, almost as a passing shot as well. We've spoken about Gordon and we've spoken about Gavin Hunt, his future at Wits, but where to for Gordon Nicholson after the Bafana job, whether it be next year or 3 years from now? I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, before he got the Swallows job, he was looking for a job almost around the continent, and we've never been able to import a coach, whether to be in Egypt or in Algeria or even overseas. So after coaching South Africa, where to for Gordon?
Well, when Gavin Hunt had won 3 titles in a row with SuperSport United, very quietly, I wasn't really involved, but there were some phone calls. I had a look at
Yeah.
clubs like Wycombe Wanderers, which was local to me when I lived in England. You have a look at some of those kind of championship level, maybe top of League One clubs, and you think maybe a South African
Yeah.
manager can go over there. There was a time when there were lots of South Africans involved at Charlton Athletic, people like Stuart Leary and Eddie Famani, and it's been a long time since a South African manager was actually exported. I mean, I suppose you could say Ruud Krol going to CS Sfaxien in Tunisia, winning the title after 8 years, is a great sign of a South African manager that's done well. Ruud is obviously a Dutch legend, but he went straight from Orlando, after a year, from Orlando Pirates winning the treble to taking CS Sfaxien to a title in Tunisia. And now, the great thing, I just wanted to mention this quickly, Joe, it could be CS Sfaxien against Orlando Pirates in the semi-finals of the African Champions League. CS Sfaxien have already qualified. Pirates look likely to qualify. What a game that would be. The Tunisian champions against Orlando Pirates under Ruud Krol, and that bring them all back together, and Roger Nassar. I look forward to that. But for Gordon, when Gordon's tenure with Bafana Bafana runs out, I assume that one of the big clubs in this country would be top favourites, and I would have thought if he does well, if he qualifies for the next for Morocco in 2 years' time for AFCON, I would have thought that someone, one of the big clubs, someone like, I don't know, TP Mazembe, would you want to go there? Blimey, their TV keeps breaking down, doesn't it? And I imagine Gordon would become. It's like Roger. If Roger leaves Orlando Pirates at the end of the season, having got to the semi-finals or the final of the African Champions League, surely, Joe, someone at one of those big clubs in Egypt, Al Ahly or Zamalek or one of the big Congo clubs, they're going to turn around and say, well, that Roger Nassar doesn't look like a bad coach. He's got contacts throughout Africa. So I look forward to the day when South African coaches become, poached by other African countries and even by European countries. That would be, I think, the ultimate compliment for Gordon Iggesund.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's hope so. I suppose those are our top three candidates, Gordon, Roger, and Gavin, which also poses another question: when are we going to ever get a black African coach winning the Absa PSL? But obviously, that's a thing for another day.
No, it's not, Joe. When was the last time a black African guy won the PSL title?
True. Because
I was going back the other day. You go Roger, Augusto Palacios, Stuart Baxter, obviously, sorry, and then Palacios, and then Kroll, and then there were the three Super Sports under Gavin Hunt, and then before that it was the Sundowns 2 years, wasn't it? And I don't think Pitso was in charge.
I think it was under Neal
involved
back then as well, and then Gordon as well. So I don't think there's actually been one in the new Absa Premiership, or as the Castle Premiership, but as it was called then.
Well,
so
if anyone can correct us on that, I'm just quickly looking now, but if anyone can correct us on that, I'm quite happy to be proved wrong. That's why Steve Compella and his need to be, and Pitso obviously, need to be kind of encouraged and helped, just like any other part of our society. We need to make sure that there's a full and fair breakdown across the levels of coaching. And I think, looking at what Gordon's been doing with Serame Letsoaka, Serame himself could emerge as a contender for a top job at some point. Just as the tragedy of Thomas Madagagi was that he never got to coach a top side on his own, and that remains one of the great sadnesses of football, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure it does. And I mean, I suppose the other great hope that there is, if Kaizer Chiefs do drop their no local coaches policy, is hopefully that one day they're gonna give Dr. Kumalo the chance, which I mean I'm for as a Kaizer Chiefs fan, but then also the other side is that Doc is such a legend, and once you go into coaching, like we saw with Maradona, your legacy can become a little bit tainted because, he's the one guy who's gotten his jersey retired and all of that, and then once you start coaching the team, then you can start bearing the brunt of the fans and actually, getting fired, and then that almost affects how you're going to be remembered as a Kaizer Chiefs person, so there's also that one other side of thing, but obviously that's a more personal thing.
Of course it does, Joe. I mean, I felt a bit sorry for Doc. Again, he was thrust into the void, wasn't he, after the departure of Vladimir Vomosevic, and didn't really pick up the reins, didn't really take it on. I don't know why that happens, and why Stuart Baxter, he's done great. But then, look, mate, we could talk all day, could we, Joe? Listen, I'm going to have to move on to my next one. Joe, it's great to talk to you, mate. Let's stay in touch. Let's get you back and talk about where Chiefs are going. Couple of weeks' time, hopefully they'll recover from what has been a very, very interesting 10-match run with only 2 wins, 11 points out of 30. We need to talk about that after the weekend.
Yeah, no, we do indeed as well, and also I suppose we need to talk about the transfer policy this time around of Bobby Mdow, who normally has a rampage in Zimbabwe during the transfer window. And this time he only came back with one striker, which was the return of the prodigal son. But I suppose that's what we'll talk about when we have a chat again in a couple of weeks.
I heard a lot of their money went to supplementing the Hoffenheim loan deal. But so Chiefs have got Maritzburg. Chiefs have got Maritzburg this weekend. If they lose that game at home, I think we're going to see some quite interesting stuff next week. But I'm sure Stuart Baxter will find a way to win, with Knowledge Masona looking back to his best for his country. Hopefully he'll take that on to his club as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Good stuff, Joe. Love to talk to you. And easy to talk to you. That's what I like. Cheers, mate.
All right, thanks, Neal. Cheers, man.
Cheers, Joe.
Bye.
See, I knew it, Comfort. I knew that Joe Mann would be easy to talk to, knowledgeable, can reach out to anyone. And I want people to understand that these guys, that Robert and him, whew, that when they take all those calls and they're coming in, and Beverly and Fang was all banging the old switchboard, in the new studio, will we be able to take some calls, do you think?
Yeah, we'll be able to.
We'll be able to do all that, won't we? I'll have to try it. You and I will be trying our skills on that kind of...
This is Bulls Visual Radio.